Welcome to the Chairman's Perspective Podcast.
Welcome to the Chairman's Perspective on the KUDZUKIAN Network. Today we've got a great show with Juvenile Court Judge Dan Michaels. We're going to be talking about everything in Juvenile Court of Memphis and Shelby County. So hold on, we'll be right back with more of the Chairman's Perspective.
Jazz, America's own original musical art form. When did it start? Who were and are some of the major players? How do you distinguish what kind of jazz you're listening to? We talk about the great and lesser-known artists, songs and tunes, the instruments, and the social impact jazz has had on world culture since its beginning at the start of the 20th century.
Riffin' on jazz on the KUDZUKIAN Network. KUDZUKIAN!
And we're back on the Chairman's Perspective. Today we've got a very honored guest. I really appreciate you coming in today, Judge.
Absolutely.
Today we have Judge Dan H. Michael. He was elected Judge of Juvenile Court of Memphis and Shelby County in August 2014. Mm-hmm. He is absolutely not new to the bench. He has worked with some amazing leaders in his time. In 1995, Judge Michael was appointed by Chief Counsel to Judge Kenneth Turner, who, quite frankly, I think is really a legend in this community, but absolutely a robust career. In 2001, Judge Turner appointed him to the bench as a full-time juvenile court referee, and in January of 2013, Judge Curtis Person appointed Judge as Chief Magistrate and a Special Judge. Judge, you do some amazing work. You're doing the heavy lifting in probably one of the most difficult areas of Shelby County right now, and that's dealing with our juveniles and our juvenile offenders. You are over 9 lower magistrates, and you preside over major crime dockets, hearing really the most serious felony cases in Shelby County.
Right.
Just as an introduction, Judge, for people that don't know you, how did you get into the law? Where did you go to law school?
Yeah.
And how did you gravitate toward juveniles?
Well, that's a real interesting question and answer. I grew up in the service station business, back when we called service stations service stations. My father was an Esso Exxon franchisee since 1954.
Wow.
And as a child, I worked to earn money at that service station. But he was really high on education. I had 3 sisters. He was kind of from the old school. He felt like that it was my responsibility to learn. He had a mantra that he used with me on a regular basis. You earn, you learn, and then you return.
Wow.
And I think I got that mixed up, but the mantra was, it's your job to support your family and the folks that are part of your family.
Sure.
And then it's your job to turn around and give back to the community that you drew your earnings from. When my father retired, we were partners in the business. He started working at MIFA as a volunteer, and he worked there till the day he died. So he showed me the way. And when I made a decision to go back to law school, it was based on the fact that I had been in business for years. I was able to pay my way through law school. I didn't intend on leaving the business, but I fell in love with the law and litigation. And that's what drew me in. Now, how did I wind up at juvenile court?
Sure.
I took a class, an internship, where we practiced at juvenile court in front of the judges down there in my 2nd and 3rd years. Ken Turner, who was the judge, called me into his office one day and said, "What are you going to do when you get out of law school?" And I said, "Well, I'm not sure, other than practice law." And he said, "Go to work for me." That was in 1992, and I've been there ever since.
So you went to law school here in Memphis?
Here in Memphis.
And so you're born and raised in Memphis?
Born and raised in Memphis.
I don't know if a lot of people realize that.
They may not. I walked to elementary school to Sherwood.
Sure.
I grew up in Robin Hood Forest, And then my father moved us out east near our service station on Park Avenue. I went to Colonial Junior High. That's
Sure.
where I met my wife, Debbie. And then she went to Overton. I went to MUS because I was the only boy. I had 3 sisters, so my father stuck me at MUS. I had a choice. I could go to Christian Brothers,
right,
or I could go to MUS, and I chose MUS because they only had to wear a tie once a week. And the guys at Christian Brothers had to wear a tie every day.
Yeah, I know as an alumni of Christian
Right.
Brothers. Well, you're listening to the Chairman's Perspective. Today, I'm really honored to have a good friend, Juvenile Court Judge Dan Michaels. We're talking about juvenile court in Memphis and Shelby County. Judge, a lot of people don't realize not only do you have 9 Lord magistrates that you preside over, but also you're also responsible for the administration of the court, the administrative services, court services division, the child support services division. How many juveniles and parents do you see over a period of a year?
Well, if you count the number of folks that come through the front door every year, it's a little bit over 400,000 people come through our doors. If you compare us to 201 Poplar, which is the busiest building in the county, and you subtract the square footage, we're actually busier than 201 Poplar because we've only got 3 floors. They've got 12. We're extremely busy. We will process about 50,000 cases a year, half of those being in the area of child support, the rest being in the areas of abuse and neglect of children, children who are accused of delinquent acts, children who are accused of really serious violent delinquent acts, and then children born out of wedlock where parents are arguing over custody and visitation. So we're very, very busy.
It is hard to imagine that 400,000 people come through those doors. And again, if you're not familiar with juvenile court, it's right over on Adams.
That's right, 616 Adams.
616 Adams.
Victorian Village, right there. Mm-hmm.
It sure is hard to imagine that.
It really is.
It really is, because that is a lot of individuals that are also in a time of trauma and
absolutely
confused, quite frankly.
Right.
I'm sure, fortunately, as a parent of 2 teenagers, I haven't had to visit your court,
right,
and I hope I never do, but it's got to be pretty disruptive for that kid who steps out of line for the first time or makes a really bad decision.
Yes.
In addition to those individuals who, unfortunately, you see again.
Right. Well, and and let me make a small correction. I now have 12 magistrate judges.
Oh, 12.
To handle
I didn't realize that.
To handle the workflow.
That's still not a whole lot of judges.
No, it's not for what we do. And of course, the building's old, and we've only got 8 courtrooms, so it's like playing dominoes. You're moving those chips around constantly so you can get dockets heard in and out of those courtrooms, those 8 courtrooms. We see people at the worst times of their lives. That's one of the reasons when I came in, I started working with the University of Tennessee Health Sciences Center to train my staff to be trauma-informed and trauma-responsive. The families and children that come before us don't want to be there. They have to be there. Getting a summons to court is never a pleasant thing. It's frightening. I tell people all the time, you come into my building, you're stepping into a foreign country. We speak a different language. We speak legalese. And we try to keep things straightforward and simple so that when a parent comes in or a child comes in trouble, they understand what's going on. We let them ask questions. We make them part of the process. We're there to try to help children and families get through this process and not suffer from it any more than they have to.
Judge, thank you so much. We're going to be right back on the Chairman's Perspective. We're talking about the state of juvenile court, and we'll be right back.
The Chairman's Perspective on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
Hey, I'm Williams Brack, co-host of Grind Set. The insight you gain from us and our guests will motivate you to take the leap into entrepreneurship. Make sure to check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast provider.
Grind Set on the KUDZUKIAN Network. KUDZUKIAN!
And we're back on the Chairman's Perspective. Today we're with Judge Dan Michaels. Today we're talking about the state of juvenile court. Judge, again, thank you so much for being with us here. Just last week you talked about the state of juvenile court. Where are we in Shelby County as it relates to the challenges, the opportunities? Again, please share with us a little bit about your staff. I see your staff. I work with a number of your staff members, outstanding public servants, but just a little state of the of where we are right now.
Well, it's interesting because we have come a long way in a short amount of time. One of the things that I brag about when I'm in the community all the time, we have cut transports of juveniles to our court by law enforcement over the last 6 years by 78%.
How did you do that?
Well, we've done it through several mechanisms.
Okay.
We went to our school system and we said, you're sending us too many children for minor offenses who don't belong in detention. And we developed what we call the Schoolhouse Adjustment Program Enterprise that is in 42 Shelby County schools, where they handle 9 separate offenses in the school system instead of sending them to us. When I first got to juvenile court, Chairman, we would see 800 to 900 children a month brought by law enforcement into our building. Last year alone, I think we had 123 all year.
Wow.
So we have chopped off that school-to-prison pipeline with our LEAP program, where officers can call in and say, I've got this child in my car, he did this, what is his detention score? And the detention center will say it's lower than it needs to be. You need to write him a summons and take him home. So those minor offenses, what I call juvenile behavior, they don't get arrested. They get a summons. They get to go home. Now, they still have to respond to us. But then we have other programs that push them out of the system to keep them from getting a record. And the programs I'm talking about didn't just come out of thin air. They came from ideas from the staff that work in that building. And it's incredible how knowledgeable that staff is and how they're committed to doing what's right for children and families in Memphis and Shelby County.
Judge, this is not your first rodeo. What troubles you the most? You and I serve on the Memphis Shelby County
we do.
Crime Board, and you've been very clear and candid about what really troubles you and what you see.
Yeah.
Do you mind sharing with us, not any names, of course, because I know you won't do that, but what troubles you the most about your job?
The hardest thing I am asked to do under the law and by the legislature here in Tennessee is sit on the transfer docket and have to send a child to the adult system. I do not enjoy doing that. It breaks my heart because, to be blunt, Mr. Chairman, in the many years I've been doing this, I've never seen a child that didn't have unlimited potential,
right?
Even those I have to send downtown. But by following the law and looking at the facts, there are times I have to send children to the adult system, and it breaks my heart because we're losing that potential. I call it a tragedy. It's a tragedy on both sides. The victims suffered from their behavior, and now the defendant's going to suffer from an adult system. That's the hardest thing I've got to do. My biggest fear comes from the fact that the children I see are raising themselves. They're not being parented.
Mm-hmm.
They turn to the street for help. And the street is always open 24/7, 365. The gangs are out there. The gangs in Memphis are a serious problem, and they're recruiting them younger and younger. We're having them come in at 12 and 11 who are already associate of gangs. You add gangs and street behavior and you add guns into the mix, and you've got a very, very serious problem. And it breaks my heart because we're losing a generation of children.
You're listening to the Chairman's Perspective. We're with Judge Dan Michael today talking about everything with juvenile court. Judge, when you talk about juveniles that you do have to send to the adult through the adult system, what type of offenses are we talking about in terms of what those juveniles are committing?
Very, very violent, serious crimes. Most of the children that go to the adult system, in fact, the vast majority are over the age of 17. They're approaching the age of 18. Numerous first-degree murder cases, attempted first-degree murder, aggravated rape, aggravated robbery, where guns are used and there's violence, shots are fired, someone's injured. Those are the cases that most likely go downtown in the last year. Now, that's not to say they all do, because the facts are different in every case. I may have a child come in who's charged with an aggravated robbery and a carjacking, but their culpability is so low and their record is so good that they deserve rehabilitation. I had a case today involving two young men that we're rehabilitating in juvenile court. The state had asked me to send them downtown, and the charges were serious. But I saw in their families and in them the opportunity for rehabilitation, so we kept them here in the juvenile justice system. It is a very, very tough group of kids that come before me, and the sad thing is they've been made that way. I have yet to see a child, well, maybe a half a dozen in my career, who picked up a gun at 16 or 17 and did something to somebody. These kids are so thoroughly abused and traumatized from a young age, all they know how to do is fight back. And when you have a child on the street, they're going to rob and steal to feed themselves, to house themselves. Now, not to be so negative, it's only about 250 or 300 kids a year that really commit the really violent crimes. It's a very small group of kids. So you may have one child come in that has 15 violent crimes he's being charged with. So it's a very small group. And what I'm trying to do is focus deterrence on that small group, get the components in the community to stop that behavior before it gets out of hand. And that's why we have got to pull the parents into the loop, because without parents, they're lost.
You know, Judge, we'll talk about more of it in the next segment, but I know when we were together the other day, pastors spoke up, and they were pretty vocal about, you know, the lack of mom and dad being at home, or, you know, and you brought it up, and a lot of people do not understand it. We do have juveniles that go home where mom and dad are both active gang members.
Yes.
I've seen some kids that have tried to pull themselves out of that situation, but it's really difficult, if you can imagine.
It is very difficult.
Your mother and father both being gang members, but that's what we're
we're dealing with. Yeah.
You're listening to the chairman's perspective. Today we are really honored to have Judge Dan Michaels with us. We're talking about the state of juvenile court in Memphis and Shelby County. Judge Michaels is nationally known, but is certainly a great local asset to our community, and we'll be right back on the Chairman's Perspective.
The Chairman's Perspective on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
Funking up your airwaves and jamming the good information in your ear. Once again, it's Funky Politics.
Funky Politics.
Funky Politics. KUDZUKIAN.
We're back on the Chairman's Perspective. Today we've got Juvenile Court Judge Dan Michaels with us, talking about the state of juvenile court. Judge, we've talked about some of the challenges. We've talked about your dynamic team at juvenile court. What do you think we need to see from government? What do you think we need to see from community leaders? And honestly, I've talked to so many parents in my role as chairman of the commission. For those parents who are struggling, they want their kids to do the right thing. They're making bad choices. What options do they have to come to you or come to juvenile court when they see their kid going off the tracks, but they can't physically or mentally deal with what's going on? So again, what opportunities should we be pursuing? And then for that parent that is quite frankly lost or floundering with their troubled child, what do we do with that?
Well, we get a lot of parents who come to us whose children aren't in trouble with the law. We don't turn them away. We try to help them. The men and women up in our evaluation and referral section frequently reach out to families who are coming to us for help but aren't involved in the legal system. And of course, technically, you have to get in trouble before I can help you, which is crazy. We turn to a lot of individuals in the community who run small neighborhood programs for kids. You know, we've got gentlemen across this community who teach young men and young women how to fix a lawnmower, small engine work. I think about Jimmy Chambers, who runs Camp Chambers. He is an investigator for the DA's office. He and his wife run a program for boys that are getting into trouble before they get into trouble. We lean on all those helpers in the community. What do we need? We need political will to do the really hard work. We as a city, and you can look at any urban area, it's the same. We have let our urban areas go. The infrastructure is broken. We don't really have a public transportation system, right? The grocery stores are gone. You got to drive 5 miles to get to a grocery store, which is a long way to walk. If we really wanted to do it right, we would reopen neighborhood schools, because when you pull a school out of a neighborhood, you kill its soul. Reopen those neighborhood schools, rebuild the infrastructure, attract businesses into the communities, give the people who live there hope that they can walk to school safely, they can get a job and earn some money close to home, and they don't have to travel halfway across the county to do it. But like other major areas, urban areas across the country, we've let that slide. And it's costing us. Right. And it's costing us in crime. And that's a real problem.
You know, I spoke with a young gang member who had actually come through your system and was getting some help with a local nonprofit. And I just had a conversation with a group of gang members, which was a little odd, but it was very eye-opening, and I didn't really know what the answers were going to be to my questions. But I asked a group of young men who are all about 15 years old, what could I do to help them? And I was absolutely blown away with this young man who is an active gang member who is trying to turn his life around. Right. And he said, Commissioner Billingsley, I need something to do in the evenings. Right. I need a safe place to study. I need a safe place to be able to clear my head and actually study. Right. But he said it's really important if I can get a job on the weekends. In the summer, I've got to get a job. I got to be able to get out of my environment. Right. And I was so surprised by that answer. I don't know what I expected from that young man. Right. But he was asking for help for some things that we should be able to do. And so you hear those same every day simple answers. Every day. If you listen to the kids who are in the trouble, they'll give you the answer to their problems. There was a young man who was transferred on a murder charge some years ago. He now speaks through the sheriff's program. And this young man will tell you he got expelled because he was a class clown. He didn't do anything wrong. He had never been in trouble before, but he got expelled. Well, back then, there was no law forcing you to go to school once you got expelled. He turned to the streets, and he got in trouble. He was tried and convicted as an adult. He's doing well. He's teaching other kids, and he's talking to the community. But his simple answer was, had you left me in school where I was making good grades, I wouldn't be here. So we made it worse. We made it worse. Zero tolerance makes it worse. You listen to the State of Juvenile Court with Judge Dan Michaels today. Again, Judge, I think sometimes a lot of us, including public officials like me, have to listen. Right. I don't know if we always do a good job of that, but we've got to do a better job listening to the individuals who are involved, as well as from, of course, experienced leaders like you. Every year we have a tremendous budget challenge in Shelby County, but I think we're at the state of no return on our current detention center. I'm a champion for trying to rethink that and put youth in a more appropriate setting. Can you say anything about the need for offenders to be reformed or offered education while they're incarcerated? I don't think a lot of people think about that. They don't. State law now requires that detention centers provide education. We were 6 years ahead of that, 7 years ahead of that. We brought Hope Academy into our small detention center at the court many years ago, and they do a wonderful job of educating those children. Education is one of the keys. Neither you or I get to where we were without an education, and we know what an education can do for you. So education is one of the keys. It is critical that we build a system that respects the future of these children, because they've all got futures. And if we keep housing them in a 40-year-old facility, it does not give them that respect. That's why I have argued and pushed for a new detention facility. Either take an older facility and rebuild it to make it work for us, or build a brand new one. That's going to be up to the county commission and y'all's work. But as far as I'm concerned, the center they're in does not respect the child. Now, those folks out there that say, well, if it's tough, it'll teach them not to come back. That's not it. It's dangerous for children. It's dangerous for the detention monitors who have to be in there. It's old. It's outdated. They need a place where they can feel safe, where, like that young man tells you, he can study without disruption, and they can lay their head down at night and not worry. Right. And we need to build that for them, for the future of this city and county. You know, it seems like we're at least singing from the same song sheet. I was with Dr. Ray the other day at Shelby County Schools, and he shared an example very similar to the stories I've heard from you, Judge, where a student was studying in the middle of Sonic at a table, and Dr. Ray got up and went and talked to the student and said, "Gosh, this is great you're studying, but why are you here at Sonic?" They said, "Because my family life is so disrupted.
Yeah.
My brother's in trouble with the law all the time. My mom and dad are fighting about him, and I have nowhere to have a quiet space to study." So, Judge, we've learned a lot from you today. I want to sincerely thank you on behalf of the Board of Commissioners and Shelby County for all you do, especially for all your staff and your magistrates that do the heavy lifting in our community. You're making a big difference, and hopefully we can make a big difference to make your work a little easier.
I appreciate that. I really do, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Michaels. We're going to be right back on the Chairman's Perspective on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
20 with Tanya, presented by the Commercial Appeal.
20 minutes of the challenges and opportunities, we face in Memphis, but also a lot of the things nationally that concern me and that should concern other people as well.
20 with Tanya.
On the KUDZUKIAN Network.
I want to thank you for listening to the Chairman's Perspective on the KUDZUKIAN Network today. Today was such a great honor to have Judge Dan H. Michael, our Juvenile Court Judge, with us, talking about the state of juvenile court. We've got a lot of issues to address in Memphis and Shelby County, but thanks to the efforts of people like Judge Dan Michaels and the team at Juvenile Court, we're headed in the right direction. On behalf of the chairman, I want to thank all those employees of Juvenile Court and across Shelby County that work so hard to take Shelby County forward. This is Mark Billingsley on the Chairman's Perspective, and we'll see you next time.
The Chairman's Perspective Podcast. Executive producer, Shelby County Commission's Chairman, Mark Billingsley. Directed, produced, recorded, and distributed by KUDZUKIAN.